our debate question is, should English be the global language for education, for travel, for business, for scientific research, for diplomacy, for business, for education? Did I say that already? Okay, so we'll start with, who are we missing? Who? Joao. Oh dear. Okay. Well, we'll see if we can manage that. Okay. Let me just actually take attendance. I'll do this. I'll give you 1 minute while I take attendance and report Joao here. Remember, if you haven't already, I strongly suggest either on your note card or somewhere else that you just write down a question you might like to ask the other team and have your note cards ready.
Can we have note papers to take down?
There he is.
Can we have note papers to take down their opinion?
Yeah, if you can have an extra piece of paper to write down some questions. Okay. All right. Let's start the debate, okay? Let's start the debate. Okay, we'll start with Joao's team. And remember, I'm in the back, I'm invisible, so I'll just help you keep track of time. But otherwise, you're just working together as a team. So let's see here. Who's starting off on Joao's team? Yeah, is you Ashkan here first? Okay, so approximately 2 minutes. We'll start persons 1 and 2. Then we'll go to this team 1 and 2, and then we'll have some time for question and answer.
Is it the minimum or maximum?
I would say that it's a minimum expectation, but if you go too long, I'll ask you to stop. So, okay, whenever you're ready.
So, good morning, everyone. I am representative of 4 English group. And I just want to tell you to imagine the world without any wars, without any racism, any discriminations. That would be possible if we all would speak the same language. Well, my point is just to speak the same language. But the reason we prefer English better than other languages is because 1.5 billion people are already speaking English right now. English can bring peace and also war reduction because everyone would understand themselves. It's gonna make people to be mutually comprehensible, and they would be friends and trade with peace. Also, English can bring poverty reduction by economic growth, as we could see in past so many nations which was colonized by England. They got better economics when they had before that. And also, people would say English can endanger their language. Well, they can keep their language when they're a child. I mean, they can use it until they go to primary school. But after primary school, everything would be in English. But they still can keep the language. They can't just use it outside because no one would understand that language. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ashkan. Let's go on to this team, persons 1 and 2, Ivana.
So, hello. I want to introduce my group by saying that there are about 6,000 languages in the world and half of them are dying today. So we have to preserve that and not just let the language dying at an unprecedented rate. A popular poet introduced a poem by saying that language are important to our identity, and he want to give a message to the poem to say that we have to preserve them because it's important. The poem say, "If I forget my native speech and the song that my people sing, what use are my eyes and ears? What use is my mouth? If I forget the smell of the earth and do not serve it well, what use are my hands? Why I am living in the world? How can I believe the foolish idea that my language is weak and poor if my mother's last word were in Ivenki? Ivenki is a language that is dying today. So, would you like to see people suffer from the orchestra and their dead language? Our team is against the fact that English should be the global language of the world because people can't live in a peaceful world. It's simple, people have to have difficulty in the world to live. When a language disappears, automatically the percentage of the culture disappears too, and it's important to have many different variations to live. So, for example, historical, economical, and traditional knowledge are important because, as I said before, the variation for people to live is important for many aspects like health and goods. The benefits of bilingualism are like speaking more than one language can give more opportunity for career or to speak with other people and communicate for social lives and other many knowledge. So the linguistic diversity are a crucial factor to the extinction of the language because we can say that if if we speak one language, it can be more easier. But unfortunately, no. The key factor of a peaceful world can't exist only with one language. Thank you.
Before we go on to persons 3, I'll open it up for question and answer. But anyone from Ashkan's team like to ask a question to anybody on this team? I'll give you about 1 or 2 minutes to do that, and we'll get this team. Remember, everyone should ask at least one question during the debate or answer.
I have a question, but before you question, I have another question too. Can I if Ivana said about if you speak more than one language, you have more opportunities in the job. Can I reply this in my speech?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's okay.
Yeah, it's a good idea. Questions?
Why do you think speaking more than one language is good for you have more opportunities in your job?
Because, as I said, the variation is important in the world. So if you speak 2 or 3 languages, you can have more opportunity in another country or to open other people's mind.
What about if you come from a family that doesn't have money to put you in a school that speak more than one language and you don't have the same opportunities from the other language?
That's why the technology now is more developed. You can just Google it and find some word.
Having lots of languages can you have a lot of culture. Well, the reason that so many countries are in war now is because of their culture. So how's that? We want to only one culture, but bringing English to the world.
I think that if we will have just one culture, it will be first boring because now we live with many variation. In the school, look at the many cultures that we have, and we can communicate and understand each other and be interested in other culture. So I think it would not be the same life as now, even if now we have some war, etc.
Can I turn it over to Ivana's team? Would you like to ask a question about anything that was said or anything to the other team?
Yeah, so Ashkan's speech talks about we can use other languages while we're only chatting or something. But but you are not providing us an efficient way to supervise that we are using these languages in our daily life. So we are gonna still lose our languages.
My point was to use it before going to school, not to chant. And that is just to be, and that is, I mean, it's not an official teacher, just your parents that had the language, that had learned that language before.
So I mean, if you want the world to have only one culture, then you should reduce to use other any languages because they're gonna create more cultures. So if the world has more cultures, it's gonna be more war. But you're not trying to solve this problem by using like a dominant language. So which means that you will still have war, and the world was not gonna be peaceful.
Go ahead, Demir.
Well,
Before you go to primary school, you're not going to remember the language. Plus, you can have as many cultures as you want. No one's saying you just have to be like, you just need American culture or English culture. You can be Iranian or Brazilian, but you have to speak English. Because all the communication in the world would be in English. So if you spoke your own language, no one would understand you. It's like it was big gibberish.
So how can we identify other countries? So there's gonna be no countries in the world because they don't have their own culture.
Yes, you will. I'm not saying they need just one country.
The language is only one fact from like the culture. You can have like about food, about like how people like
How you dress, how you
Yes.
talk, the way you like Arabs.
But you are gonna still lose a lot of factor of the culture because a lot of factors lead to the culture is from language.
Yeah, so we're just changing the language, we're not changing
the culture.
people's personalities.
I mean, there's a lot of factor leads to the culture, and the culture will show in the language.
Let's pause it there. Thank you for that. That's good. Thank you, Joe, Ivana, Ashkan, Teresa, and Demir. If you haven't asked a question, maybe think of one in the next few sections. We'll do 3, 4, 5, 4, 5, and then we'll do more questions. Okay? So let's. What's that?
Ideas and questions.
I know. That's what I'm saying. Good. You can ask more, but maybe give a chance for other people to ask if they haven't had a chance yet. Who's? I think Joe, you're person 3, right?
Yes.
Okay, you're up.
So, good morning. Let's imagine the world with two things: no misunderstanding and no language prejudice, like Ashkan said before. But why no misunderstanding? Because with only one language in the world, everybody is going to be able to communicate with each other easily and with no problems from like governments or political persons or in international relations. And but let's think like more deeper, and why only one language? Imagine you come from a country or a family that does not have like as many money to go to a school, that you can afford to have a bilanguage school. You can only go to a public school that only teach your country national language. And after graduation, when you're looking for a job, you have less opportunity because normally in the jobs, if you speak more than one language, you can have more opportunities. So like you're making people with less money more like affected by the language, by only speaking one language. And also, if you still pass to this, if you still can get your money, if you still can get your job, you come from a country with where the like economy is not disinvolved, is not good enough for what you do, and you want to move countries. And if all of them speak the same language, you can easily move through the countries and make like you still continue your business. So that's why I think we need to do English as the global language. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Let's go on to Reggie. Whenever you're ready.
My team considers English as a global language will be detriment of many other languages and cultures. First of all, English is a difficult language to learn, especially for those who are non-European speakers, like Asians and Africans. Take me as example. I started learning English in an early age of 5, and I'm still learning English today as a high school senior. And I'm pretty sure I'll be continuing learning English in the 5 years more in my life. It's a long time. Moreover, because it's a difficult language to learn, many intelligent students will block outside the best education of many universities. Imagine it would be such a shame that Albert Einstein cannot study quantum physics and the theory of relativity because he has poor language. Secondly, the appeal of dominant language like English will lead to increase of speed and language extinction. It may not seem like a big deal to you, but think about those great ancient artwork and products which we cannot reproduce. Because the loss of ancient language, people lost their inheritance, like Pillow of Dali, which are being rust-free for 1,600 years. Because the language become a dead language, those ancient skills are forgotten. Moreover, the language is already disappearing at an unprecedented rate. If it continue to become the global language, could cause centuries of cultures to disappear. This leads to huge identity crisis, and to many people, it will be pretty scary if Buddhists only pray to Jesus because they cannot understand Buddhist scriptures, which are not written in English. I'd like to finish by asking, sure, if Ukraine's 3,000 languages disappear, but what if it was yours?
Thank you. Should we continue on to person 4 and 5, and then we'll have another question and answer? Yeah. Person 4 and 5. So that would be
That's me.
Demir.
Do I have to read my speech like both of them or one at a time?
You can put them together. If you want to, you can take a little pause.
Okay, can I do it before it?
Yeah, that's fine. Or you can just combine and go from one to the next without pausing if you want.
Do I start?
Mm-hmm.
Today, English is the #1 international language. It's the international language. Over 400 million people are native. 300 million people use English as their second language, and 500 million people, they know some English. 90% of global transactions are in English. When everyone speaks English in the world, there will be no misunderstandings, because think about it, there are two big companies that ship products from American ship to a Korean one, and the workers, the employees start to fight because they cannot resolve the problem because they don't speak the language. If everyone spoke the same language, there will be no misunderstandings. Plus, English has a very important place in diplomacy, trade, and business. It's not bad. It's not bad. What else? Yeah.
Okay.
Do
You want to
I'll
go
go
on to
back
person
to
5 or?
Because I don't understand how I have to do it. Person 4 and then person 5?
I would just continue with the person 5, yeah. Yeah. You ready?
Okay. I think I forgot. So can I go like later on person 5 after they go?
I don't know how that's going to help because you're either ready or you're not.
No, because for now I was just preparing for the first one.
Okay, we'll just go into person form right here. Okay, right.
Okay, so I'm against with the data. So as Wendy already claimed, the English, so the English as a global language has caused damage to the extinction of languages. This is a very serious problem. For example, Britain's colonialism of Tasmania in the early 19th century happened and unknown languages died. And in this wider context of language preservation and renewal, a reconstructed Tasmanian Aboriginal language has recently emerged. And in Australia, an estimated 250 local Australian languages and more than hundreds of language dialects were spoken before British came, but they're gone. That cultural dispersion caused by inversion has resulted in more than half of these languages that is vanishing. So many languages are on the brink of the extinction. And so in fact, with the video we watched before, it is estimated that so one language dies out in 14 days. And okay, and so we think that the spreading English caused the extinction of languages. So to preserve the languages, I mean like the identities, we should not be the English global language. Thank you.
Thanks, Ray. Let's go on. I'll open it up to anybody. You can ask a question and let the other team respond, or a specific person respond about something they said, or about a general question that you have. So go ahead. I'll give us about 4 minutes to do that, 4 or 5 minutes. Go ahead.
I understand all the benefits and like good points that you guys made. Ashkan said it will reduce conflicts in the future because people will all speak English. And Joel said it helps job opportunities. And Demille from Emotional Appeal said a lot of people already speak English now, and it would be easy process to make people speak English. But the problem is, how do you many other people still want to speak their own languages, right? And they want to use their own language to preserve their own culture, and that's a really good way to preserve the culture. If people stop speaking English, stop speaking their own languages, their culture will very soon die out. How do you solve that conflict and eliminate those people that want to speak their own language?
But that's why we're debating here. That's what we're thinking about.
Well, let me give you an example.
Let me finish. He said, we're debating which one is the best approach, but we're not debating what is the solution for this. For our group, we're con because we don't need to do anything. We just let it flow. We don't need to eliminate any people that speaks their own language.
Can I give you an example? When say you have a university that tell you don't want to go, you have to go. And it's good for your university, for your future. So people don't want to change their language, but they have to because it's for their benefit.
For the benefits of their kids, for the future.
No, I'm not agree because we can say that English is high in forces now, yes. But
What?
English is high in many forces, it's very high. But our own culture and our culture and our language is more than that. One day, when I will have, one kid, I will teach him my language, Serbian. And imagine that we have to speak English. Yes, but I will teach him Serbian because it's my own language. And in school, when like he will go in school, he will search some people that speak Serbian too, and like they will speak Serbian.
That's why
So
we don't want to like make difference, you know, because of the language. Like you can see in the school, like you said, like if you have like people that is from your country that speak the same language as you stay in the same group. You only speak with another ones with English. So that's why we're trying to transform. Everyone speak English. We're not gonna make like different groups with different language.
But
Yeah,
according
but it's
to
not
the
good.
situation, that the differences is not according to our languages, it's according to our ethnic groups. So like our appearance doesn't look the same. So when I come to the school as a new student, I will find an appearance that looks the same as mine. So which means that if like we all speak English, but my best friend can be other ethnic groups, but it doesn't mean like when I first enter into the group, I will try to find the same ethnic group as mine because we felt like we have more similarities, not only the language.
That's what we're trying to. Yeah.
So
Because-
that's
okay,
not
okay,
the
okay,
difference,
look,
bring
you
my
come-
language.
You come to the school, yes. You start talking to Chinese people already because you feel comfortable speaking Chinese. You feel more comfortable because
Not only because of the language, but also because of the culture. We think everything in almost the same way because we are teach in that country and we think at the same way. That's it.
Well, if you speak the same language without the same culture too.
Not really.
like
I agree. That is good, but the problem is, like history and the cultures are like mirrors to reflect the day. Do you understand? Like I don't know if I phrase it right. Just my idea. Like if we have and everybody have the same identity now, like the past we had, and those like tears and damage we had in the past will be forgotten. That's what we do not want to see. So that's why I think it's better to keep.
Yes, but speaking the same language is safe as well.
why?
Okay, think about it. You come to Germany, yes? It's night. You're lost, and you come up to a German person. You're like, yo, where's this address? He's gonna be like, no,
So where is the internet? You can use the internet to translate all of
yes,
your
internet. But imagine your kid doesn't have a phone. Your kid doesn't have Wi-Fi. Maybe it's a very old system.
We're living in 21st century. So like 21st century, we must have a phone with you.
Imagine you go out.
Yeah.
Okay, yes. Imagine someone wants to punch you,
And then
and then you say
You
help.
use translator like, hey, don't punch me.
Tom, did you have a question?
I mean, there's this kind of imagine. Because imagine the world is destroyed, then we don't use language. Is that right?
No, don't push me.
You all imagine if somebody was being punched, can you run? Just don't tell without telling anything. Is that right?
Well, you
And
don't know.
if somebody want to beat you, you are speaking English to them. Don't touch me, please. You are speaking like that. No, you are not using
If I
English.
hit him, I will
There is
still punch him.
only two choices. One is you wrong. Second is you beat him back. It is only two ways.
Well, meeting
Not
back
you will not speak English to say, oh please don't touch me. I'm scared.
that's the
Don't do
war,
it.
but
It is not
a German can hit another German. That's the war too. So you have no excuse for that. I'm Serbian. I'm coming here in the school, and I don't have the same benefits that like many people have here. I don't have the same money as Joel said, but I'm here because I'm fighting every day for that. So yes, I'm speaking English, I'm speaking Serbian and French, and I'm the same as you. And I have my culture, and I'm learning the culture of English. I have the two, and I'm good for that. Like we are good with that.
Like, I've been to Germany and France, and sometimes some people, when you speak English to them, they just don't care because they're kind of like, they're racist or maybe like they just want their language to be like said. So they just don't even answer you and they just pass you. Like,
That's
whatever
led by
they
the
say.
personality, not from the language itself.
It is from the language because if you try to speak them in French, even if you have a low French academic, they would actually help you. Like, yeah, because you're trying to speak in that language.
But you said some of the people, so it's not everyone.
Well,
So it depends on the personality. Because I have met a lot of French, they're willing to speak English to me, so that doesn't make any sense to our position.
Do you think most of the people that works in the restaurant or whatever speak English because of they want to or because of the school?
Because of nothing. Like most of the person in the restaurant are in different culture. They are not French, they are not English, they're like Japanese, Spanish, Serbian, Russian, and everyone else. Yes. So they are speaking French and English because they learn that here. Like they are coming here, but nobody like push them to come here and say yes, you have to work here, you have to work here. So they want to. Like I want to learn English because it's a benefit for me, but I want to stay with my language that is Serbian and speak Serbian because it's a benefit too. So I want to keep the two languages. So
Guys, I want to thank you for all your ideas. If we have time at the end, we can do some more question and answer. We'd love to hear from Ray. Let's go on to question 6. We'll do 6, and then the conclusion 7, 8, 7, 8, and finish up by 10:35.
So, good morning, everyone. It's an honor to be here today. To begin with, I want to make a question that nowadays is harder to answer. But I will try to explain a little bit more the benefits. So, what are the benefits of English being a global language? One of the most important advantages of English being a lingua franca is that we will reduce the gap between countries and the communication barrier is not going to exist anymore. This is so important because with the misunderstood between nations can cause like a war or even worse, destroying families, destroying people losing their houses, losing lives. Therefore, we believe that English becoming the language that everyone speaks will increase the peace and decrease the chaos. And I think that, like we were saying, that, like for an example, here in the school, we're gonna try to stay with people that. For an example, when I got here in the school, I tried to look for people who speak Portuguese because I was feeling like a little bit more comfortable to say it. But I think, and sometimes I didn't make friends because I didn't speak English very well or something like that. So I would like to reduce this and like since the beginning you speak English to reduce all the ethnic groups and difference between people in the school, in the works, to be all the same, and that's it. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Juliana. Let's go back to person 6 on the stage, Teresa. Whenever you're ready.
Good morning, everyone. Our group assumed that the positive side hands out 3 statements that are trying to persuade us to believe their opinion. And I'm glad to hear that you mentioned all of them. So, first, you said there's a large number of people that are using English and a large ratio of countries are using English as their official language. So I just want to ask, what's the reason of you to choose English as a dominant language? So basically, you are trying to persuade us that because English is used by a large population, so we should choose that. But according to the research, Mandarin, Spanish, French, or even Hindi, they should be the better choice according to your reason because they are used by a larger population. So we claim that language is essential not only because there are the implements that help and aid the communication, but also there are the symbols of extinct cultures. So we promote to use bilingualism and avoid the dominance of language is because that we refuse to lose endangered civilizations. And second one, you said using only English can keep the world in a peaceful situation and there will be no chaos and the whole society is going to be stabilized. But actually, there's no correlation between the peace and using and we have the dominance of the language. It doesn't really make sense. So, according to the history that shows us, wars often created by the conflicts between different opinions and beliefs. So it's not the difficulties that created by the linguistic diversity. So that make an interesting assume that Hitler, Churchill, Stalin, or Mussolini, they all speak English in World War II period of time. Are Hitler or Mussolini gonna stop invade other countries during that period of time, or they're gonna stop starting the war and create the huge war and a lot of people died in that war, right? So this thing is not gonna happen because they all speak different languages, and if this assume is correct, it's not gonna happen either because they're trying to take revenge, not only trying to make the world more stabilized and more peaceful. So that doesn't make really sense. Finally, you said it can monolingualism, especially the dominance of the language, can improve improve the world economically. But that seems to be totally wrong because the opposite situation that when we use bilingualism contributes more to the economy. According to the recent research from Orhan Agrejad, so he claimed that higher level bilingualism was roughly associated with higher earnings of around $3,000 per year, and the effect held even if other variables that are known as influence earnings were collected from gender, potential social economic status. So, which means that higher level bilingualism actually can make somebody access to labor markets, one mainstream and one ethnic. So, which shows that monolingualism will actually lag the development rate of the economy. So, all in all, our statement is that we should not use the dominance of the language, not just specifically English, but other language too. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. We've got 5 minutes, guys, so let's finish this up. Person 7 and 8, Ashkan, and then I think Tom is the last person.
Was Sarah and they do together or just
You can do it together. Just do it together, yeah.
So I have a. I want to ask.
Let's finish, okay. Go ahead, Ashkan, whenever you're ready.
So I heard all the points from the opposite team and they're honorable, obviously. But in conclusion, we would say, I want to just restate that English is a global language would bring peace and economic growth. Now I want to point out to some things that you said. As Benji said, he is learning English and he will continue learning English as he didn't understand it very well. Well, Portuguese, Chinese, Russian, they are all hard languages to learn. But how are you so fluent with it? Because you learned it as a child. When English is going to be a global language, you're going to teach your kid English. Because that's the language they will speak. So they're going to be fluent in it. And how are we going to bring peace? When you understand someone, you feel them, you put yourself in their shoes, and you feel their problem, you feel how they feel. So obviously, you're going to have to be more gentle. And even, I said, when in France, even if you try to speak French with low academic, they would still appreciate it because you're trying to communicate with them. so they're gonna help you. Also, according to British Council, Italy, Spain, and Middle East had large trading and their economic growth because they use English as a trading language. The reason that Saudi has a great connection with America and selling oil because they use English, not Arabic, to talk to them. And also, English. Why we choose English is because first English is easier, and because many people are using it now, and also how the run. If you imagine the world with like 200 countries in this world, only 20 of them weren't attacked by England. So they were all colonized by an English country. Even India, of course, they speak Hindi. They were colonized by England. So England was their language. Australia, America, Canada, they all speak English. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashkan. Tom, let's finish up, okay?
Only 2 minutes left.
That's okay, go ahead. We'll stay an extra minute, guys, if that's okay.
Just 2 minutes.
Just 2 minutes, that's all you need.
With the education development fast, more and more the local. With education development fast, some of the local schools start using English to teach their students, but it caused the local language losing their dominance. Therefore, the local language will become extinct in the future. As we said, if English becomes the only language which will be spoken in the world, it will cause half of the other language extinction. Those kind of language was built solidly in thousands of human history. If we lose them, the time will never come back. We are planning for protecting the history of human knowledge. Newton said, if we can think further, it is by standing on the shoulder of giants. In our point that we can make our life more convenient, but it never based on destroy the history and culture of human. Yeah. Some people believe that the world doesn't need a lot of language, since it might block the language unification. But we hold different views. We should do the best what we can do to protect the language. But from English aggression, there are some language in the world that only 1 or 2 people knows it. If we don't protect them or keep allow the English to become dominant in the world, those kind of language will disappear in an unprecedented rate. We are just living under erosion of the English alone. English becomes the only world language to speak. It is a lot of people are looking for to gain the benefit from this kind of movement that everyone speaking English. It is we can just ignore and endanger language as their languages. So the English shouldn't be the dominant language in the world. We must keep the linguistic diversity and vitality in the sustainable rates of English competing. Thus, it is our resolution.
Perfect timing. I will send the assignment's already sent in the debate reflection assignment. There's a link to the YouTube channel. In a couple of hours, that video will be available, so make sure you watch it as part of your reflection. And that'll be due on Friday. Thanks, guys.